She sold it to who? I gasped, nearly dropping my teacup as my son clinked his glass. To the maid's brother, he smiled, at my retirement party. But before I could even stand, he added, and he's offering you a generous rental agreement. Rental? In the home my husband built? As guests whispered and avoided my gaze, Carmen, the maid, smirked, then asked if anyone needed refreshments, but that wasn't even the worst part. Later that night, I caught my son rifling through my safe, stealing the last copy of my deed. They thought I was just a tired old woman. What they didn't know was I had carbon copied everything, and I had 30 days to burn them all with it. You won't believe what happened next. My name is Evelyn Whitaker, and I'm 75 years old. Each morning for 50 years, I've brewed Earl Grey tea in this sunlit kitchen, watching my garden flourish through the window. My late husband Thomas built this home with his own hands, and together we raised our son Darren here among the roses and routines. Now Darren, my only child, manages my finances with tight smiles and locked computer screens, treating me like a confused child rather than his mother. My friend Martha, who used to work in real estate, warned me to stay vigilant. What Darren doesn't know is that I've kept meticulous carbon copies of every deed and document in my grandmother's old cookie tin, right next to my prized shortbread recipe. The kettle's familiar whistle mingles with the rustle of retirement party streamers, but something in my son's efficient preparations rings hollow. But let me start from the beginning. I spent the afternoon arranging finger sandwiches and directing Martha where to hang the happy retirement banner in my living room. The space filled quickly with familiar faces. Neighbors who'd shared countless holiday meals under these oak beams, former colleagues who remembered when my hair wasn't silver, and even young families who'd moved in recently, drawn by my garden's reputation for the sweetest tomatoes on the block. "Your roses are spectacular this year, Evelyn," Mrs. Henderson called from the window. 50 years of green thumbs, and they're still blooming strong. I smiled, though my attention kept drifting to Carmen, our maid of 3 years, who seemed unusually focused on circulating appetizers past her brother Anthony. He'd been lurking by the fireplace since arriving, studying my wedding photos on the mantel with an interest that made my skin prickle. You know that feeling when the air pressure drops before a storm? That's exactly how it felt when Darren stepped forward, wineglass in hand. The room quieted as he tapped it with a spoon, and I noticed Carmen position herself near the door, still holding her serving tray. "Everyone," Darren announced, using his board meeting voice, "I'd like to make a toast, not just to Mom's retirement, but to an exciting new chapter in her life." He paused, and I saw something calculated in his smile. "I've taken steps to simplify things for her future. As of last week, I've sold this house to Carmen's brother, Anthony." The room went silent. Then gasps rippled through my guests like dominoes falling. My knees nearly gave out, and Martha quickly pressed a chair behind me. Through the fog of shock, I watched Carmen and Anthony exchange knowing grins. "It's really for the best, Mom," Darren continued smoothly. "At your age, property management is just too much stress. Anthony's offering you a fantastic rental arrangement. Very generous terms." Rental arrangement? In my own home? I'd trust a snake before I'd trust that rehearsed tone of his. The room spun slightly as decades of Christmas mornings and Sunday dinners flashed through my mind. My fingers found the familiar groove in my armrest, the one Thomas had accidentally carved while building the chair. "Does anyone else need refreshments?" Carmen asked brightly, breaking the awful silence. Several guests mumbled excuses and drifted toward the door, unable to meet my eyes. I could have screamed, could have caused a scene right there. But something in me, maybe those years of handling difficult board meetings myself, knew that silence was my sharpest tool right now. So I watched. I noted how Anthony's hands stayed in his pockets, probably fingering whatever papers they'd used to steal my home. I catalogued every satisfied smirk between him and Carmen, every rehearsed gesture from my son. "I think," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt, "we should end the party early. I'm feeling rather tired." The gratitude on my guests' faces would have been comical if I hadn't been fighting back tears. Martha squeezed my shoulder before leaving. "Call me," she whispered. "Any time." Once the house emptied, I waited until Darren left, probably to celebrate his clever scheme somewhere else, before heading to my bedroom. My hands shook as I pulled out my grandmother's old cookie tin from under the bed, where I'd kept copies of every important document since Thomas died. But when I opened it, the most recent folder was missing. My property records, the ones from the last 5 years, gone. I forced myself to breathe slowly, counting backward from 10 like I used to teach my kindergartners. The missing papers confirmed what I'd already suspected. This was no impulsive decision. This was calculated. Theft, planned while I'd trusted my son to handle my online banking. I decided to confront Darren in the morning. In the quiet of dawn, when he couldn't hide behind party noise and prepared speeches, I'd corner him with the truth. But at 3 a.m., I heard it. The soft click of the hallway door, followed by careful footsteps heading toward Thomas's study, where we kept the wall safe. I jerked awake at dawn, my neck stiff from dozing in Thomas's old armchair. The study door stood half open, and even before I walked in, I knew what I'd find. File cabinets gaped empty, their contents presumably joining my missing deed copies. The wall safe hung open too. Thomas had always said I was too careful with paperwork, but right now, those carbon-copied backups in my cookie tin felt like gold. The smell of coffee drew me to the kitchen, where Darren sat reading the paper like it was any normal morning. Carmen wiped the already spotless counter with sharp, circular motions, while her brother Anthony lounged against the doorframe, manila envelope tucked under his arm. "Morning, tenant," Anthony said, his smile oily. My fingers twitched, wanting to slap that smirk right off his face. "Coffee, Mom?" Darren didn't look up from his paper. "Everything's been handled, so you can just focus on planning your move. We've found a lovely assisted living facility. I'd like to see the original paperwork," I cut in, keeping my voice steady despite the rage bubbling in my chest. My eyes drifted to the key rack by the door. The mailbox key was missing, along with my spare house key. I remembered how Darren had insisted on taking over my utility payments online, for convenience. How many other threads of my independence had he quietly snipped while I wasn't looking? "All the documents are digital now," Darren replied smoothly. "My attorney has copies of everything. Really, Mom, you don't need to worry about any of this." I watched Carmen's reflection in the window as she exchanged glances with her brother. They thought they had me cornered, a helpless old lady, too confused to fight back. Well, they didn't know who they were dealing with. 50 years of managing my own household, and I still balanced my checkbook to the penny, every month. I let my hands shake slightly as I reached for my coffee cup. Could I at least have a week? To go through the photo albums? There are so many memories. I blinked rapidly as if fighting tears. "Of course," Darren answered quickly. Too quickly. "Take whatever time you need to sort through your things, but the sooner you're settled somewhere safer, the better." I nodded meekly, clutching my robe around me like armor. They bought it completely, these vultures who thought age had dulled my mind along with my joints. Let them think I was defeated. Let them think I was simple. That night, I spread my remaining documents across the bedroom floor. The cookie tin's contents told a story. Property tax receipts, insurance papers, utility bills in my name. I circled every place that should have required my signature, every consent form that should have crossed my desk. In my real estate guidebook, dog-eared from when Thomas and I bought the house, I found what I needed, a clear statement about notarized signatures for property transfers. I was halfway through my list when the doorbell rang. A courier stood there, looking apologetic as he handed me an official envelope. Inside was a notice to vacate, 30 days to leave my home of 50 years. I watched the clock tick past midnight, each metallic click like a hammer falling. 30 days. They'd given me 30 days to prove what they'd stolen or lose everything. The calendar on my wall seemed to loom larger, its numbered squares like a countdown to erasure. My hands gripped the vacate notice until the paper crinkled. 30 days to fight back. 30 days to prove that somewhere in their perfect plan, They'd made a mistake. And they had made a mistake. They'd underestimated me. Next morning hit, like a slap, when I heard Anthony's voice drifting up from my garden. He was out there with some contractor, pointing at my beloved rose bushes and throwing around words like demolition and modern landscaping. Each word felt like a thorn in my heart. Those roses had bloomed through 5 decades of springs. I'd planted the first bush the day Thomas and I moved in. "The whole garden needs to go," Anthony declared loudly enough for me to hear, through the kitchen window. "Make room for a proper entertainment space." He caught me watching and had the nerve to wave, that same oily smile plastered across his face. When he came inside, I was ready. "I'd like to see the sale documentation," I said, keeping my voice light and confused. Just a forgetful old woman trying to understand things. Anthony's smile tightened, just a fraction. "That won't be necessary. Everything's been properly filed." He pulled a folded photocopy from his back pocket, holding it just far enough away that I couldn't quite read it. But I caught the words "owner consent" at the top, and my stomach clenched when I spotted the blank space where my signature should have been. Convenient how the bottom corner of that photocopy was mysteriously cut off. "The complete originals are with the notary," Darren cut in smoothly, appearing from his makeshift office in what used to be our family room. "All properly signed and witnessed, Mom. You know how careful I am about these things." I let my shoulders slump, nodding vaguely. "Of course, dear. I just get so confused these days." The words tasted like vinegar, but I forced them out anyway. "I think I'll go get some fresh air. Maybe that nice coffee shop down the street?" "Do you need me to drive you?" Darren asked, already turning back to his laptop. No. The walk will do me good." I patted my pocket where I kept my phone, the one thing they hadn't managed to take control of yet. The cafe was quiet this time of morning. I ordered my usual, Earl Grey with a splash of milk, and pulled up the county property records website on my phone. Thank goodness for that computer class at the senior center last year. The search took a few tries with my shaking fingers, but there it was, a pending. Transfer on my property, but no recorded deed. I filed that detail away carefully, like storing away a spare key. When I got home, Carmen was stacking moving boxes in the hallway. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. The sight of those cardboard walls closing in sent a tremor through me, and for a moment, despair wrapped around my throat like a scarf pulled too tight. There on the kitchen table sat a glossy brochure for Sunnyvale, retirement community. The photos showed smiling seniors playing bingo and doing chair yoga. Was this really all that was left for me? A tiny room where someone else decided when I ate, slept, and took my pills? I picked up the brochure, then stopped. The metal edge of my cookie tin caught my eye from where it sat on the counter. Instead of throwing the brochure away, I folded it carefully and slipped it inside. Evidence. My hands shook as I pulled out my old address book. Martha Patterson's number might not even work anymore. We'd been neighbors for 20 years before she moved to Florida, and she'd been one of the sharpest real estate agents in town. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello?" That familiar voice, still strong despite the years, sent relief flooding through me. "Martha, it's Evelyn Whitaker." "Evelyn! Heavens, it's been ages! Are you all right?" "You..." Sound. "I need your help, Martha. My son. He's sold my house without my consent. They're trying to force me out." A long pause, then steel entered Martha's voice. "Start with the notary log. Every real property transfer needs notarized consent from the owner. That's you. If you didn't sign in front of a notary..." Martha arrived at 2:00 sharp, carrying a leather portfolio that looked like it had seen its share of real estate wars. She settled at my kitchen table, the same spot where I'd balanced our family budget for decades, and laid out our battlefield strategy with the precision of a general. "You remember how particular notaries are about their journals, don't you?" She spread out a blank form. "Every single signature gets logged. Date, time, ID shown, the whole 9 yards. If your son claims you signed transfer papers, there'll be a record." I nodded. trying to ignore the moving boxes Carmen had stacked in my peripheral vision. And if there isn't, then we've caught them in a lie. Martha's practical gaze swept the room. But we need to move fast. Once that 30-day eviction notice runs out, fighting this gets 10 times harder. The weight of that deadline settled on my shoulders. 30 days. Just 4 weeks to prove I hadn't signed away my life's foundation. First things first, Martha said, pulling out a legal pad. We need samples of your authentic signature going back at least 5 years. Tax returns, insurance papers, birthday cards to the grandkids. Anything that shows how your signature naturally evolved. That got me moving. I retrieved my file boxes from the hall closet, breathing in the familiar scent of old paper and organized memories. I kept carbon copies of everything important, I told her, setting the first box down. Old habits from my accounting days. Thank God for your filing system. Martha smiled as I pulled out neatly labeled folders. Most people your age just throw everything in a shoebox. We spent the next hour building a timeline of my signatures. Property tax payments, insurance renewals, even the congratulations card I'd sent to my niece's wedding last spring. Martha arranged them chronologically, studying each one through a magnifying glass. She produced from her portfolio. When I showed her the photocopy Anthony had flashed earlier, her eyes narrowed. Look at this baseline, she said, pointing to where my supposed signature sat on the page. See how it jumps up and down? And the font spacing is different from the rest of the document. My heart quickened. Cut and paste? Amateur hour, Martha snorted. They probably thought you'd just roll over and accept it. Didn't count on you. Having friends who know what to look for. I sank into my chair, fingers tracing the grain of my kitchen table. How many family dinners had we shared here? How many homework assignments had I helped with? I need to confront Darren, I said quietly, but I can't let my temper get the best of me. Write down exactly what you want to ask him, Martha suggested. Keep it simple. Keep it calm. We don't want to show our hand too early. Together, we crafted a list of questions, and I practiced delivering them without letting hurt creep into my voice. Martha nodded approvingly as I got better at maintaining a neutral tone. Now, she said, checking her phone, I've got a meeting set up with Gloria Chen tomorrow. She's a mobile notary Anthony's used before. We'll bring tea, make small talk, see what she remembers about any recent property transfers. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Darren. Movers can start next week. It's for the best, Mom. My hands trembled as I typed back. Please bring the originals tomorrow at 9. I set the phone down carefully, like it might shatter. Martha watched me, her expression gentle but determined. Deep breaths, Evelyn. We're building our case piece by piece. The porch light flickered through the kitchen window. It had been doing that lately. Another item on my endless repair list. My phone buzzed again with Darren's response. Tomorrow is impossible. Martha's eyebrows rose as I showed her the message. Well, she said, isn't that interesting timing? The next morning, sunlight streamed through my dining room windows, catching dust motes that danced above the polished table where I'd served countless Sunday dinners. Now it felt like a courtroom, with Martha beside me and Darren across from us, his jaw set in that stubborn way he'd had since childhood. I need to see the original documents, Darren, I said, keeping my voice steady just like we'd practiced. The actual papers I supposedly signed. He pulled out a manila folder and slid some papers across the table. Everything's right here, Mom. I don't know why you're making this so difficult. My heart sank as I realized they were just printouts, scanned copies with that slightly fuzzy quality that comes from repeated photocopying. Darren jabbed his finger at one page. Your consent is right here, plain as day. I leaned forward, and my blood went cold. There was my name all right, but those loops, those awkward, swooping letters. You know how you can tell when someone's trying too hard to make handwriting look natural? That's exactly what I was looking at. Martha picked up the page, tilting it toward the window light. She circled 2 letters with her pen. Mrs. Whitaker, Would you say your signature typically slants this way? Never, I said, pulling out one of my old check carbons for comparison. I've always written with a right slant. This, I gestured at the forgery. This tilts left. The notary saw everything, Darren snapped, color rising in his cheeks. It's all completely legal. My hands went ice cold, but I forced them still in my lap. Which notary, Darren? What's their name? He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the hardwood, the same floors his father had refinished 30 years ago. This is ridiculous. I'm not playing 20 questions about paperwork that's already filed. He snatched the documents back, stuffing them into the folder. But in his haste, he left the envelope behind. Martha reached for it before I could, her eyes narrowing at something in the corner. Evelyn, look at this partial notary. Stamp. I saw it then. The faint purple ink showing just enough of a date. March 15th, I read aloud. But that's 2 weeks before the retirement party, before you ever announced selling my house. The room went absolutely still. You could have heard a pin drop on those old hardwood floors. Timeline crack, Martha whispered, and I watched my son's face change, just for a split second, but long enough to know we'd found something. The rest of that day felt like a blur. Martha and I gathered every scrap of my handwriting we could find. Old Christmas cards, insurance forms, even my garden journal where I'd noted planting dates for my roses. But Darren had vanished, not answering calls or texts. Night fell, and I was sitting in my favorite chair by the window, listening to the first crickets of spring, when my phone buzzed. A text from Anthony, the maid's brother. Just a photo. No words needed. It showed a demolition permit application, my address clearly visible at the top. I looked at my calendar on the wall, the one where I'd been marking off the days until eviction like a prisoner counting down a sentence. Day 2 of 30. According to the permit details in that photo, they could start taking sledgehammers to my walls by day 10. Martha touched my shoulder. She'd stayed late, bless her heart. We've got the timeline discrepancy documented, she said. And those signature samples will help, but we need to move faster now. I nodded, staring at the photo on my phone until the screen went dark. Somewhere in my garden, a cricket chirped again, reminding me that the world kept turning, even when everything you thought you knew turned upside down. The next morning, Martha drove us to a small office park on the edge of town. Her sensible sedan reminded me of all the carpools I'd done in my own practical cars over the years. The notary's office sat between a tax preparer and a travel agency, both of which had probably seen better days. Now remember, Martha said as we walked up, we're just here to check the journal entries. Keep it casual. The notary, Ms. Chen, looked up from her desk with reading glasses perched on her nose. Her office smelled of paper and coffee, with a familiar rubber stamp. Thunk sound I remembered from my banking days. Anthony Rodriguez? She flipped through her journal when Martha asked. Oh, yes. He's been in several times this spring. Always in a rush, that one. My heart picked up speed. Did you notarize my signature on a property transfer to him? For 742 Maple Street? She adjusted those reading glasses, peering at me. No, I haven't notarized anything for that address. Who did you say you were? Evelyn Whitaker. I'm supposed to have signed over my house to Mr. Rodriguez. Ms. Chen's brow furrowed. That's strange. He usually brings everything to me, but... She tapped her pen against the desk. Last month, he mentioned using someone else for speed. Said his regular notary was taking too long checking IDs. Martha's pen scratched quickly across her notepad. Would you be willing to put that in writing? We may need to request a subpoena for the other notary's records. While they discussed legal details, my mind caught on something Ms. Chen had said about Anthony being in a rush. It reminded me of something I'd seen the night before the party. A white delivery van idling in front of my house. Maria's cousin Luis had been driving, and I remembered thinking it odd since he usually worked days. Martha, I interrupted, trying to keep my voice steady. We should check if any paperwork was delivered to the county recorder's office that night. Back in Martha's car, we pulled up the county website on her tablet. The property transfer still showed as pending, Not fully recorded yet. Martha's face brightened. This is good, Evelyn. We can still contest the proof before it's indexed. Once it's recorded, fighting it gets much harder. She made a call while I watched spring clouds drift past the car window. Yes, hello. This is Martha Sullivan. I need to schedule a consultation with your handwriting expert. Yes, it's time-sensitive. Property transfer dispute. The expert could see us that afternoon. Dr. Harrison's office walls were covered in magnified signature samples and scholarly certificates. He listened intently while examining the photocopied signature through what looked like a jeweler's loupe. I'll need exemplars, he said. Recent samples of your natural signature, Mrs. Whitaker. As many as possible. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table under the old brass lamp that had lit so many family homework sessions. Page after page, I signed my name. Full signatures, partial ones, just initials. The alphabet in upper and lower case. My hand cramped, but I kept going, hating how someone had twisted my signature into those awkward loops. My phone buzzed. A text from Darren. Movers coming tomorrow. Morning to help pack your keepsakes. Don't want anything valuable damaged in the renovation. I typed back, I'll be ready to sort photographs. What I didn't say was that I planned to photograph every box they touched, every label they wrote. The more documentation, the better. Martha had left her card on my fridge with her cell number circled in red. Call any time, she'd said. Day or night. The doorbell rang, startling me. 8 o'clock. Who would... Through the front window, I saw a moving truck idling in my driveway, its headlights cutting through the early evening darkness. They were a day early. The moving van's headlights swept across my living room walls as 3 burly men trudged up my front steps. Martha stepped in front of me before I could open the door. Let me handle this, she whispered, pulling out a leather folder. Just play along. I nodded, my throat tight as... She opened the door. The foyer chandelier, the one George had installed on our 20th anniversary, cast long shadows across unfamiliar faces. Evening, ma'am, the lead mover said, clipboard in hand. We're here to start boxing up. Wonderful timing, Martha cut in, her voice honey smooth. I've just finished preparing the inventory forms. We'll need to document everything properly for insurance purposes. She pulled out a stack of papers. Shall we begin with the parlor? The movers exchanged glances while Martha launched into a detailed explanation of her cataloging system. I seized the moment to slip away to my study, my sensible flats silent on the hardwood floors I'd polished every spring for 50 years. The envelope Darren had left behind still lay on my desk, slightly crumpled at one corner. My hands trembled as I lifted the flap and pulled out several folded papers. The serum. Top one caught my eye, a payment notice printed on garish yellow paper. Final warning, it screamed in red letters. Account holder, Anthony Rodriguez. Status, delinquent, urgent. Balance due, $47,832.16. Immediate action required to avoid legal proceedings. The date was just 3 weeks ago. My stomach clenched as I fed the papers through my desktop scanner, one by one. Evelyn? Martha's soft voice made me jump. She closed the study door behind her. The movers are occupied with their inventory forms. What did you find? I pointed to my computer screen. Martha's eyes widened as she read, then narrowed thoughtfully. Well, she murmured, that explains the rush to liquidate your property. They needed fast cash. I sank into my desk chair, 50 years of motherly trust crumbling like dried roses. My own son. Wait, there's more. Martha clicked through the scanned documents. Look at this business filing. Maria and Anthony Rodriguez, listed as managing members of AR Property Solutions, LLC, registered just last month. The pieces clicked into horrible place. The retirement party announcement timed perfectly with Anthony's loan deadline. Maria's increasingly frequent cleaning visits to help me organize. The rushed sale before anyone could look too closely at the paperwork. They planned this together, I whispered. My voice sounded old and frail in my ears, and I hated it. Used my own home to cover his debts. Martha squeezed my shoulder. I've seen this before. We'll be at the courthouse when it opens tomorrow morning. But Evelyn—" She glanced toward the foyer where heavy boots scuffed against my floors. "They might try to pressure you tonight. These types usually do, once they realize someone's onto them." I nodded, remembering the confident smirks at my retirement party, the way they'd assumed I'd just quietly accept their betrayal. "I'll be ready." The movers finally left around 11, though they'd managed to box up most of my photo albums despite Martha's delaying tactics. I sat in my darkened living room afterward, watching moonlight trace patterns on the walls while the grandfather clock ticked away minutes. I'd prepared what I needed to tell the judge: how I'd never signed any transfer, documents, how my son had helped himself to my paperwork, how Maria and Anthony had conspired to steal my home. Simple facts, delivered with the dignity I'd earned through 75 years of honest living. The clock struck 1, each chime echoing through the quiet house. Then I heard it, the soft scrape of a key in the front door lock. I held my breath as it eased open. "Just keep her quiet until recording," Darren's voice whispered. 2 more days. Maria murmured something back, too low to catch. A floorboard creaked near the stairs. My heart thundered so loudly I was sure they'd hear it, but I stayed perfectly still in my chair, gathering every word as evidence, feeling the weight of betrayal settle like stone in my chest. Martha was waiting in her car when I stepped out at dawn, the manila folder clutched tight against my cardigan. The morning air held that peculiar stillness that comes just before sunrise, reminding me of countless early mornings tending my roses while dew still sparkled on their petals. "Ready?" she asked as I settled into the passenger seat. I nodded, though my hands shook slightly as I smoothed the folder on my lap. As I'll ever be. The courthouse was practically empty when we arrived, just a few early bird clerks shuffling papers and sipping coffee. Martha guided me straight to the civil filing window, where she pulled out the temporary restraining order documents she'd prepared overnight. "Emergency filing," she told the clerk, sliding the papers across the counter. "We need to pause a property recording." I watched as she methodically attached our evidence: the preliminary letter from Sandra Chen, the handwriting expert, highlighting the suspicious signatures, my documented history of property ownership, the timeline of events that exposed the rushed sale. The clerk, a woman about my age with kind eyes, studied the papers carefully. "Elder fraud concerns, I see." She glanced at me sympathetically. "Judge Harrison has an opening next Thursday. He takes these cases very seriously." "Perfect," Martha said. "He's exactly who we need." The stamp came down with a satisfying thunk, and just like that, we had a court date, 7 days away, well within our 30-day window to stop. The recording. "You're doing great, Evelyn," Martha assured me as we left the courthouse. "Now we focus on building our case." The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Martha helped me organize a pristine exhibit binder, decades of tax payments, insurance renewals, utility bills showing my consistent stewardship of the property. Each notarized deed from previous refinances displayed my authentic signature, proof of what my real handwriting looked like. Around noon, fatigue hit me hard. I stared at the stack of documents, and for a moment, the fight drained out of me. Would it be so terrible to just give in? Accept one of those retirement apartments with their beige walls and vinyl floors? Let someone else worry about maintenance and yard work? The image of my rose garden flashed through my mind. 50 years of careful pruning and seasonal blooms, the peace I found in tending each bush. My grandchildren learning to walk on that soft grass. Martha must have sensed my wavering. She reached across the kitchen table and squeezed my hand. "Hold on for just 1 more week, Evelyn. We're closer than you think." My phone buzzed, a text from Darren. "Moving company charging storage fees for delay. You'll be responsible for extra costs." Martha's lips tightened as she read over my shoulder. "Reply with the hearing. Notice. Let him chew on that." I forwarded the court document without comment. The silence that followed felt heavy with meaning. The afternoon sun was setting when Sandra Chen called. "Mrs. Whitaker, I've completed my preliminary analysis. The signatures show multiple inconsistencies with your known exemplars: slant angles, pressure points, letter formation patterns. I'd be happy to testify to a high likelihood of forgery. For the first time since this nightmare began, Martha smiled, a real victory-is-coming smile. "Thank you, Sandra," she said into the speakerphone. "We'll need your full report by Tuesday." I felt something loosen in my chest as I hung up. One small step closer to justice. Then my phone lit up with Darren's message. "If you go to court, I go public." Martha's face hardened as she read it. Classic intimidation tactic. He's scared. I set the phone down carefully. Remembering the little boy who once brought me dandelion bouquets, where had that child gone? "What do you think he means by going public?" "Doesn't matter," Martha said firmly. "What matters is we have a solid case, a good judge, and truth on our side. Let him try his threats." I squared my shoulders and picked up another stack of papers to organize. 7 days until we faced Judge Harrison. 7 days to prove my son had betrayed my trust and forged my signature. 7 days to save my home. 3 days flew by in a blur of preparation, and suddenly I found myself sitting in courtroom B of the county courthouse, my hands folded tightly in my lap to keep them from trembling. The wood panels and stern portraits of past judges made everything feel more real, more final. Martha sat beside me, radiating calm confidence, as Judge Harrison, a silver-haired man with alert eyes, reviewed our filing. "You know that feeling when your whole life hangs on what happens in the next hour? That's where I was, watching the judge study each document like he was solving a puzzle. He started with the vacate notice, then moved to the county records showing the pending status of the property transfer. When he reached the alleged consent form with my supposed signature, he paused, adjusting his reading glasses. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, "please approach the witness stand." My knees weren't as steady as I would have liked, but I made it there without wobbling. After I was sworn in, Martha guided me through our prepared testimony with the precision of a master gardener pruning roses. "How long have you owned the property at 1242 Maple Street?" 50 years this September, I replied. "My late husband and I purchased it in 1973. "And your current health status?" "I see my doctor regularly. For routine checkups. Blood pressure controlled, memory sharp as ever. I still do my own shopping and gardening." "Did you ever sign any document consenting to sell your home?" "No, Your Honor, I never signed anything like that." My voice stayed steady, though my heart was racing. The handwriting expert, Sandra Chen, took the stand next. She projected enlarged images of my authentic signatures alongside the questioned document. "Notice the inconsistent slant angle," she pointed out. "Mrs. Whitaker's genuine signatures maintain a consistent 15-degree right slant. The questioned signature varies between 20 and 25 degrees. Additionally, the pen pressure points and lift patterns don't match her natural writing rhythm." I watched Darren's face as she testified. He kept his expression neutral, but his leg bounced under the counsel table, a nervous tell he'd had since childhood. The maid's brother sat next to his attorney with that same smirk I'd seen at my retirement party. He whispered something, and his lawyer stood up, presenting a document with flourish. "Your Honor, we have a notary affidavit confirming Mrs. Whitaker's signature." Judge Harrison accepted the paper. "Bailiff, please retrieve the notary's journal from the clerk's office. We'll verify the entry." The courtroom fell into tense silence while we waited. I could hear the tick of the wall clock, the shuffle of papers, the soft squeak of someone shifting in their chair. When the bailiff returned with the journal, Judge Harrison spent several minutes comparing dates and entries. His eyebrows drew together, then slowly rose. "Counsel," he said, "this journal entry for the date in question shows a completely different signer, a Margaret Chen, for an unrelated real estate matter." He looked directly at Darren. "And the maid's brother. Would anyone care to explain this discrepancy?" Darren's face flushed red. "There must be some clerical error, Your Honor. Perhaps the notary recorded it on a different date." Permission to introduce one more piece of evidence, Your Honor? Martha interrupted, holding up a familiar paper. The judge nodded. This is a payment demand notice from Fast Cash Lending showing the defendant, she pointed to the maid's brother, was in default on a significant loan due the day after Mrs. Whitaker's retirement party. The paper landed on the judge's desk like a thunderclap. He studied it, then surveyed the courtroom with steel in his gaze. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 for extended testimony. And let me be very clear. His voice hardened. There are to be no asset transfers or property alterations overnight. Is that understood? Yes, Your Honor, came the mumbled chorus. Walking into the hallway afterward, I felt simultaneously stronger and more vulnerable than I had in weeks. Martha was gathering our papers when Darren brushed past me. "Drop this," he hissed in my ear, "or you'll regret it." Before I could respond, he stepped into the elevator. The last thing I saw was his cold stare as the doors slid shut. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse early, watching sunlight filter through the tall windows. You know that hollow feeling when you're about to face family in battle? That's what sat in my stomach like cold lead. Martha spread our exhibits across the counsel table with methodical care. I noticed her hands were steady while mine kept fidgeting with my cardigan buttons. The gallery behind us filled quickly. Seems word had gotten around about a grandmother fighting back against her own son. Judge Harrison entered promptly at 9, and the air in the courtroom grew thick with tension. "Your Honor," Martha began, holding up a document, "I'd like to present corporate filing records from the Secretary of State's office." She approached the bench. This LLC was formed exactly 1 month ago, listing both the maid, Maria Torres, and her brother, Antonio Torres, as managing members. The judge studied the paper. "And the relevance?" "The timing, Your Honor." Martha pulled out a calendar she'd marked. The LLC was formed 3 days before Mrs. Whitaker's retirement party, the same party where her son announced the sale. More importantly, this date here, she pointed, shows the LLC formation coinciding precisely with the final notice from Fast Cash Lending. I watched Darren shift uncomfortably in his chair. He wouldn't look at me. Furthermore, Martha continued, the party announcement came exactly 1 day before, the lender's deadline for full payment. The handwriting expert returned to the stand next, this time with a digital projector. The screen lit up with my authentic signatures from tax documents, holiday cards, and utility bills spanning decades. "If you'll observe," Ms. Chen explained, clicking through slides, "Mrs. Whitaker's genuine signatures show consistent pressure points and pen lifts in specific locations." She overlaid the questioned document signature. Under magnification, you can see the dramatic differences. The image zoomed in, and even from where I sat, I could see how the forged version stuttered and stopped in all the wrong places. Like someone trying to copy a dance they'd only seen once, all jerky movements where there should have been flow. "In my professional opinion," Ms. Chen concluded, "this signature is unquestionably not Mrs. Whitaker's." Judge Harrison removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Based on the evidence presented, I find the alleged consent document non-credible. I'm issuing an immediate injunction against any property transfer." He looked directly at Antonio Torres. "The current deed of record stands with Mrs. Whitaker as legal owner." A murmur rippled through the gallery. From the corner of my eye, I saw my neighbor Helen press her hand to her mouth. Just last month, she'd tearfully thanked Darren for being such a devoted son after he gave a touching speech at the garden club about protecting me in my golden years. I turned to look at my son then, really look at him. His face had gone slack, the careful mask of concerned caretaker crumbling away. All those years of birthday cakes, bandaged knees, proud graduation photos. How did we end up here? When did my baby boy start seeing me as a resource to be managed instead of his mother to be loved? "We'll reconvene Friday morning for final ruling," Judge Harrison announced, "after review of relevant creditor notices." He checked his calendar. That's 2 days before the attempted eviction deadline would have taken effect. Antonio Torres shot to his feet, already pressing his phone to his ear as he stormed toward the exit. I caught fragments of rapid Spanish, none of it sounding pleased. Martha gathered our papers and touched my arm gently. "This is going to get messy fast, Evelyn. When creditors smell blood in the water." She didn't need to finish the thought. I nodded, fingers closing around my house keys in my pocket. The familiar ridges pressed against my palm. Front door, back door, garden gate, each one a piece of home I'd almost lost. As we pushed through the courthouse doors, reporters clustered on the steps, thrust microphones. Forward. "Mrs. Whitaker, is this a new trend in elder fraud? Does family make fraud easier to hide? What do you say to other seniors whose children might be—" Martha steered me toward a side exit, but their questions echoed in my head. Is family the new fraud? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that victory tasted bittersweet when it meant watching your son's reputation die in open court. You know what's strange about betrayal? The quiet. Moments hurt worse than the loud ones. Give me courthouse drama over sitting alone at my kitchen table any day. By 3 o'clock that Wednesday afternoon, my landline started ringing off the hook. Wrong numbers, all of them. Except they weren't wrong at all. They were looking for Antonio Torres, Maria's brother, at my address. I let them go to voicemail, but Martha filled me in later. Creditors, sniffing out assets like bloodhounds. Fast cash. Lending filed their claim an hour ago, she told me over coffee. And some outfit called Premier Financial just froze his main account. She scrolled through her tablet, tracking filings as they popped up. The liens are sprouting like weeds now. 4 different creditors. I nodded, barely hearing her as I sorted through decades of photographs spread across my kitchen table. 3 piles grew slowly. Keep, donate, return. My fingers trembled over a snapshot of Darren's 5th birthday party. His face smeared with chocolate frosting, eyes bright with joy. Keep or return? How do you categorize memories when they've gone sour? My phone buzzed. Speaking of Darren, "Mom, I'm sorry, I was trying to help. You don't understand the pressure I'm under." Before I could respond, another message. "None of this would have happened if you weren't so stubborn about independence. I was protecting you. And finally, if you force this, I'll have to question your competency. For your own good." Martha read over my shoulder and made a quiet phone call. An hour later, she had my doctor's letterhead in hand, complete with a thorough assessment of my mental clarity. "Just in case," she said, sliding it into our court folder. "Some people can't accept defeat gracefully." Evening settled in like an unwelcome guest. I went through the motions of my usual routine, watering the roses, checking the mail, preparing a light dinner. But my mind kept circling back to Friday's final ruling. I'd written and rewritten my statement until the words blurred. "Your Honor, I stand before you not just as a homeowner defending her property, but as a mother whose trust was betrayed. I ask the court to affirm my right to my home and to protect others who might face similar exploitation." The roses needed deadheading. I grabbed my shears, glad for the distraction, but my hands shook so badly I nearly cut a healthy bloom. 50 years of mothering crashed head-on into the need to testify against my own son. The court binder slipped from under my arm, nearly spilling onto the damp grass. I caught it, steadied myself against the garden wall, and took a deep breath of evening air. Friday dawned with storm clouds gathering. Fitting weather for what was coming. The courthouse halls felt different now, heavy with the weight of endings. Martha steered me to our usual seats as Judge Harrison entered and called the case. I watched him scan through a thick stack of overnight filings, his expression growing grimmer by the page. Antonio Torres sat 3 rows ahead, his phone screen lighting up every few minutes. Even from here, I could make out the words, "Account seized," flashing across it. "Before we proceed to final orders," Judge Harrison began, adjusting his glasses, "I've reviewed the supplemental creditor filings submitted since Wednesday's hearing." The room went still. Martha's hand found mine under the table as the judge lifted his gavel. Years of memories, betrayal, and justice balanced on its head like a teeter-totter frozen at the tipping point. In the matter of Whitaker property transfer and related claims, Judge Harrison intoned, "The court is prepared to issue final orders." The gavel hung suspended, like time itself holding its breath. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything that had led us here. A retirement party turned ambush, a forged signature, a son's betrayal, and underneath it all, the quiet determination that had carried me through. The wood of the gavel gleamed as it began its descent toward the sound block. The gavel struck with a crack that echoed through the courtroom. You know that moment when your whole life hangs on a single word? This was mine. The court finds clear and convincing evidence of fraud in the attempted transfer of the Whitaker property, Judge Harrison began, his voice steady and firm. The alleged consent document is declared void, and any pending transfer is permanently enjoined. My shoulders dropped an inch. Martha squeezed my hand. Furthermore, he continued, shuffling papers, given the gravity of the forged signature and evidence of coordinated deception, this court is referring the matter to the district attorney's office for investigation. He peered over his glasses at Darren. Mr. Whitaker, your status as a designated caregiver is hereby terminated. The court will notify relevant professional and licensing bodies of this finding. I watched my son's face drain of color. All those carefully cultivated connections, his reputation as the devoted son managing mom's affairs, gone in a single morning. He'd built his business on trust, on being the guy who helped families through difficult transitions. Now he was the guy who forged his mother's signature to sell her house out from under her. Judge Harrison wasn't finished. Regarding the creditor claims against Mr. Torres, he gestured toward Antonio, who was still clutching his phone. The court recognizes their priority status. Any funds or assets currently held by Mr. Torres, including any claimed interest in the Whitaker property, are subject to immediate collection. Antonio's lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently. From the way Antonio's shoulders slumped, I guessed his accounts were already frozen. The payday lender's representative was already heading for the door, phone to ear. Mrs. Whitaker, Judge E. Harrison's tone softened slightly. The eviction notice is nullified. You may return to your home immediately. He paused, making eye contact. The court commends your dignity throughout these proceedings. Martha gathered our papers while I sat there, letting it sink in. Behind me, I heard Antonio practically begging his lawyer about payment plans. Darren tried to catch my eye as he hurried past, but I kept my gaze forward. Some bridges burned too, hot to cross again. You'd think I'd have rushed home right away, but I didn't. Martha and I had a quiet lunch first, my treat. We talked about her grandchildren, about the weather, about anything except what had just happened. Sometimes you need to ease back into normal. It was early evening when I finally turned my key in the front door. The house felt different somehow, not because anything had changed, but because I had. I ran my hand along the familiar wallpaper, breathed in the subtle scent of lemon furniture polish that the maid, former maid, had always used. Remember when I mentioned that garden center gift card I'd been saving? I'd bought a peace rose with it weeks ago, kept it in my neighbor's greenhouse until I knew where I'd end up. Now seemed like the perfect time to plant it. The evening air had that soft quality it gets just before dusk, when everything looks slightly golden. I knelt in my garden, trowel in hand, and dug a proper hole. My knees protested. They always do these days. But some things are worth a little discomfort. The rose's roots looked healthy when I eased it from its pot. I positioned it carefully, remembering what my mother taught me about planting roses. Make sure it faces the sun, Evelyn. Everything deserves its best chance to grow. I pressed soil around the base, tamping it down gently but firmly. The watering can was right where it always was, under the porch overhang. I watched the water darken the earth around my new rose, creating a little moat that would help it establish strong roots. Looking up at my kitchen window, the one I'd stood at countless times watching my children play, Waiting for my husband to come home, planning my days, I felt words rise up that needed saying. They weren't for anyone else, just for me, and maybe the ye. Evening air. Greed digs graves deeper than age ever could.